You've sat through meetings where someone asks one question and the entire project direction changes. Everyone nods, someone rewrites a timeline, and you're left thinking, why didn't I see that coming? Senior engineers don't ask more questions, they ask different ones. And those questions do something specific. They redirect projects before resources get wasted. They surface assumptions before they become expensive mistakes, and they position the person asking as someone who leads technical direction instead of just executing tasks. I went from a junior to senior in under 2 years by learning exactly which questions to ask and how to ask them without sounding like I didn't belong in the room. And by the end of this video, you'll know the exact 3 questions that actually shift meetings, save engineering time, and make you the person that stakeholders listen to, even if you're not really the most experienced engineer at the table. I remember I sat in a meeting once where engineers spent 40 minutes planning a brand new data pipeline. Complex architecture, multiple teams were involved, weeks of work sort of got mapped out. And then a senior staff engineer who had joined late raised his hand and asked one question that killed the entire project in 20 seconds. Here's what happened. We were deep into the how. The new pipeline, scaling, system, technical detail flying everywhere. Really exciting stuff, by the way. He had been silent the whole time, just listening. Then he unmuted and said this: "Hey guys, this pipeline sounds cool, but before we finalize, let's step back a bit. Why do we even need a new pipeline? Does this use case really need us spending all these resources on something brand new? Or can we hook this into this other existing pipeline, cut the delivery time in half, and let the other team use what they already know?" After that question, there was 20 seconds of awkward silence. And then someone unmuted and said, yeah, I think you're right. We might not really need a new pipeline. Yeah, that one question changed the entire direction, saved weeks of engineering time, faster delivery, better outcome. The question was, why are we doing this? Not in a defensive way, not challenge anyone's authority, just genuinely asking what business impact we were creating, what problem we were actually solving. And most engineers skip this question because they think their job is to build what they're told to build. Senior engineers ask it because they know their job is to solve the right problem, not just execute the how. So when you ask why before you build, you catch expensive mistakes before they happen. You stop teams from going down the wrong path. You protect resources, you protect timelines, you make better technical decisions because you actually understand what success looks like. So junior engineers usually assume someone else already asked. Senior engineers assume nothing and verify everything. But hey, look, asking the why can feel risky if you don't phrase it right. For example, the VP had asked a stupid question a few weeks ago in a cross-team meeting. That's at least that's what he called it. He prefaced it with, "This might be stupid, but," and then actually asked why we were re-architecting the system when the existing one could handle the load while we still needed product market fit. That one question saved the team months of work. So what changed for me was I realized the phrase isn't apologizing, it's giving everyone else permission to think. So senior engineers use this all the time. This might be obvious, but I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding something. Then they ask the exact question you were too scared to ask. And the phrase does 2 things at once. First, it signals that you're thinking strategically, not just accepting the plan. Second, it removes the social risk. You're not challenging anyone. You are clarifying. And that lands completely differently. I wasn't asking game-changing questions. I was asking, why are we doing this? Or what does this actually solve? It's not about talking all the time or being loud. Like I would just unmute once or twice in a meeting, ask the question. Sometimes it landed flat, not gonna lie. But other times, someone would message me after saying, "Hey, thanks for asking that, man. I was confused too, but didn't want to say anything." That's when I realized most engineers in the room are nodding but confused underneath. They're waiting for someone else to ask first. The phrase I usually use the most is, "This could be a basic question, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page here." And then I ask whatever question I have. It works because it frames the question as collaboration, not confrontation. You're not saying the plan is wrong, you're making sure everyone else actually understands it. And that shift in framing is everything. Like this one meeting, we were hashing out a retry logic for an SQS queue. I mean, everyone throwing out ideas about how we would build this custom retry system. I just raised my hand and just asked, this might be basic, but, and correct me if wrong, but doesn't SQS have a built-in retry logic? Do we really need to build this? Again, silence for a few seconds, then someone said, oh yeah, you're right. That simplifies everything. So yeah, we cut the scope in half because of that one question. The phrase gives you cover, but look, tonality matters more than the words itself. You can say, why are we doing this? In a way that sounds really defensive or sarcastic, and it'll backfire on you. So yeah, or you can say it really genuinely, like you actually want to understand, and it lands as strategic curiosity. Like for example, why are we doing it this way? Versus, oh, why are we doing it this way? Again, that's the difference between sounding junior and sounding like someone who thinks before they build it. And over time, with people I had worked with a lot, I just dropped the phrase completely. I would just ask directly, oh, why are we doing it this way? But even without the phrase, I kept the tone. Same, collaborative and curious. So that tone is what makes that question safe to ask and easy for others to hear. But asking the right question at the right time only works if you know when the meeting itself is going on track. Imagine you are 30 minutes into a meeting, everyone's talking, ideas are flying, technical details are getting hashed out, and you're the one person sitting and thinking, like, wait, weren't we supposed to lock down timelines like 15 minutes ago? What do you do? Most engineers just sit there. They let it ride. They figure someone else will step in, and when no one does, the meeting ends with nothing decided and another follow-up scheduled for next week. I was in one of those exact same ones last year. The meeting was set to decide timelines and get details of product. That's it. But 40% of the way in, we were deep into technical solutions, pipeline architecture, details about how we would build it, all important stuff, but not what that meeting was for. So yeah, I raised my hand and spoke. Hey folks, great stuff by the way. We definitely need to hash this out more, but seems like we might be going off on a tangent since this meeting is for timelines. Would it be the worst idea if we set up a separate meeting to hash out the technical details while we focus now on what we can get back to product with? Again, there was a pause. Then someone said, yeah, you're right. We need to get back on track. That's the redirect question. Are we still on track? Are we solving the right problem right now? Again, you're not shutting people down. You're not saying that ideas don't matter. You're just saying that this is important and this meeting isn't the right place for it. Let's protect everyone's time and set up the right space to solve this properly. Again, the key is how you say it. It's all about tonality. So you can say, we're going off on a tangent, and it sounds combative, right? Or you frame it as a collaborative question. Would it be a bad idea if we set up a separate meeting? That lands differently. It feels helpful, not criticizing anyone. You acknowledge the value of what's being discussed, you label it as important, and then you point out the mismatch between what's being solved and what the meeting was actually for. Then you suggest a fix, not like a command or anything, just more of like a question. That position, you're someone who sees the bigger picture, someone who's thinking about timelines, stakeholder expectations, and resource allocation, not just the code again. But asking the question only works if we're asking the right kind of question in the first place. I want you to imagine you're sitting in a meeting where your team is deep into the technical talks about encryption methods. They're exploring asymmetric encryption versus symmetric encryption. They are making diagrams, they're talking about how to build it, and someone higher up is pushing hard for asymmetric encryption. You're sitting there thinking, wait, doesn't asymmetric encryption have major size limits on what we can encrypt? Early on in my career, I was in that exact meeting. Leadership was pushing asymmetric encryption from the top down, and I had done the research. I knew there were limitations around the length of the plain text we could encrypt. I knew depending on what encoding we select, that would also cause the size limitations. I knew it will cause problems down the line, but I stayed quiet. I assumed the people higher up already had thought through all of that. I assumed they knew something I did not. I assumed asking would make me look like I didn't trust their judgment. So We built it. We put the whole thing into the code base. We were days away from launching. Then a staff engineer joined the company. He looked at what we had built and started asking questions. What about size limitations? What about the encoding constraints? What happens if we hit those edge cases? There was silence. Then someone said, yeah, this isn't going to work. We need to switch to symmetric. So we had to scramble. We rushed to get it out before launch, all because no one asked if the approach we were taking actually fit the problem we were solving. That moment changed how I show up in meetings. I don't assume the decision's already been vetted. I don't assume someone else will ask. And I definitely don't assume that asking makes me look dumb. Asking if something already exists or if the approach we're taking already works isn't questioning anyone's intelligence. You're just making sure we don't waste weeks rebuilding something that doesn't need to be rebuilt. But asking the right question is only half of it. The other half is how you ask it, without sounding like you're second guessing the entire team. You now know the exact questions that make senior engineers look senior. You're becoming the engineer who shapes a direction, not just executes tasks. And by the way, if you have been struggling to get promoted or feeling overlooked and invisible, I'll help you get promoted in the next 12 months, guaranteed, or you don't pay. If that sounds interesting and you want to learn more, click the link in the description below. And next video breaks down how to position your work so leadership actually notices it without you having to brag. And with that, as always, I'm just here to help.